Banishers, Ghost of New Eden. What do you got to say about this game?
So this was an interesting one. I feel like it's going to be one of the more forgotten games from 2024, partially because it's a smaller studio, and partially because it came out in like February, so it was very early in the year, and sometimes, I mean, sometimes even something that makes a big splash, in those first couple of months, it still kind of gets forgotten about by the time the year's over. So I wanted to check this out when it first came out. I just didn't have a chance to for a little while. And I'm really glad that I did though. So this game, to divide it into gameplay and story here, I'll talk about the gameplay a little bit first. Uh, this game is going to be like super, super familiar to play to anyone that has played like the recent God of War games. It's a very similar kind of structure, like your mini map at the top of the screen to what buttons do your attacks and special powers and how you use items change up some of your like gear and build and stuff in the menus. It's very similar. It reminds me of how in like the PS2 era you would get a lot of games like a Dante's Inferno or some of them would be like movie tie-in games like some of them would not be that great like a Ghost Rider game or whatever but you'd have like these like any game that was like popular enough would have like a number of kind of clones in a way, right? Like gameplay clones. So it's like, oh, that game's a little bit of a God of War clone. Now, that could sound insulting, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is a bad thing either, because this game manages to feel pretty good, though familiar in that sense. But where this game and where the brunt of what I want to talk about here, where this game really stands out, is in its story, which I think is really standout. I have to say these two lead characters you have here, they're banishers, as the term that they have in the game. They're kind of like exorcists. They deal with spirits. They travel from place to place, exorcising vengeful hauntings in the different lands. And you have these two characters, Red McWraith, which is just about the most Scottish name I've ever heard. And then Antea Duarte is the name of the woman. And they arrive in it's 1688 or something like that. And this is taking place in New England. Um, and so he's Scottish and she's from the Caribbean, and they clearly like travel the world together as these exorcists. But they come to this town. It's an old friend of theirs wrote them that there's a particularly nasty haunting, and this is just the opening sequence of the game. But the spirit that you end up dealing with kills Antea. She dies very early on in this game, but of course her spirit sticks around, and what you end up having is this one. It's a fun and interesting gameplay system where you're playing as two characters at once, and in that way the gameplay kind of reminds me of the Shadow of Mordor Lord of the Rings game, where you've got like two characters, right? Like one's a spirit, but they're kind of attached to like the same physical space. So you're kind of controlling and manipulating both simultaneously. But for story purposes, you end up having what I thought was actually like a very thoughtful and very believable both love story and story about grieving that these characters have to go through because they love each other very much. They're in a relationship before the game starts. This is clearly two people that have been with each other for a long time. She dies like right away, and as she sticks around as a spirit, you get to see both of them kind of deal with this passing and this kind of ending of the life that they'd had together, and watching them slowly kind of come to, well, I guess then that's where this game is also interesting. There is a bit of that kind of almost old school moral path system here. So it's up to you as the player. Are you going to basically commit like human sacrifices at like junction points through the story here to try and resurrect her, or are you going to, do kind of more do the right thing and acknowledge that like, all right, we've got to kind of let you pass on into the next world. But of course, the creature that killed her has her body, so she is herself like a vengeful spirit until you can deal with the haunting that started this whole thing. Um, I think these two characters are genuinely, I think, some of the most interesting like original characters, like brand new characters that's not in a sequel or a remake or a remaster, just completely original brand new characters. I found the dynamic between the two of them and the relationship they had to be deep and complicated, and it's not always positive even in the history of when they were alive. And it just feels very real and true. And like I ended up genuinely really caring about how they resolved things with each other by the time it was over. Now this where I might come in and criticize the game a bit here is I think it is longer than it needs to be. It is basically an open world game. It's not like a massive open world, but I'd say it's comparable to something like uh, maybe smaller than God of War Ragnarok, but bigger than God of War 2018. And there are a whole bunch of side missions, like there's other smaller haunting cases that you can deal with along the way. And I think a lot of those are actually pretty interesting. Um, and I think that they provide their own interesting moral quandaries that you have to deal with and kind of guide these characters through. But I do think by the time it was over, it did feel like there was just maybe a few too many of these other side things to do, of just a little too much of the environment to explore. And I think you could have improved it by tightening some of that up a little bit. Because like I said, the gameplay it feels so similar in its structure to the God of War games that already exist. So it's not doing anything like especially novel on that side of things. So like you could get to a point where some of like just like the sword play and just, like fighting the ghost monsters that pop up I could see that getting to be a little bit repetitive. That's just because of how big the map is and how much of it there is to explore. Um, there's always that option where if you want to just rush through the story, you can do that, but I try to give that side content exploration so I can, if I'm going to review it, I want to be able to talk about the game as a whole. And I do think that as far as like the pacing goes, it just could have been a bit stronger if you pulled that down a bit. But that still, I don't think that hurts it too much because I think these characters are really strong, and I think you get really invested in the relationship they have with each other.
This was done by Don't Node, who was the, developer on this. Publisher was Focus
Yeah.
Entertainment. Don't Node, their other credits include so they did, Life is Strange 2, which I know is a popular game. I know a lot of people like that. They also done things like Harmony: The Fall of Reverie, they did Lost Records, Bloom and Rage, which is coming out this year. Tell Me Why, there, which I guess is the Backstreet Story, I guess, there. And Vampire there. They've done that. Um,
So this is the first game of this studio that I've really played. I don't have much experience with their catalog. I guess I don't know if anything they've done before ever really caught my eye and really had me interested before this one. But if this is any indication of what they might do in the future, they've got my attention.
and this released almost the anniversary of this. Actually, it released almost close to 1 year because it's released in February 13th of last year.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just trying to see what other kind of games there that came out in February of last year that maybe it did get buried between this one. So this had Helldivers came out February 8th. So
Yep.
that was one. You had Mario vs. Donkey Kong. You had Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remastered, Skull and Bones,
Well, nobody was playing that one.
Terminator Dark Fate, Defiance, Nightingale, Pacific Driver. Hey, they had the big game Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League that was out there. That was
Yeah, I that probably I don't know if that sold more copies than this or not, but if it did, I'd be very sad because this had a way more going for it than that did.
Yeah. Sales wise, it says here it did kind of below their expectations there. Don't know. So they did say that. Let me see if I can find the exact sales. They said it did below expectations. They do have another game coming out. Like I mentioned, it's a game coming out this year called Lost Records Bloom and Rage. So it seems kind of like the look of this game is very similar to like Life is Strange and
Sure.
Tell Me Why, like kind of one of those adventure
Tween
games.
indie drama.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like Dawson's Creek, CW game, some shit
Right.
like that.
CW games. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out in February, so that if nothing else, that would have buried
Uh,
anything else, really.
yeah. So that was kind of tough for it there. So yeah, kind of got buried a little bit there with that. Is this game on sale or anything like that, or is it still
So,
full price?
so when I got it, it was like part of the right around Christmas, like holiday sale. So it was only 29.99 at the time. It's probably I don't know if it's on sale still right now. Um, and here's what I would say is I think it is, with certain elements of the gameplay, it can get repetitive, and it doesn't necessarily, even though I'd say it feels good, it doesn't feel like the most original gameplay in the world either. So it's and then again with the length of it, I think it drags a little bit in certain sections. So it's not a perfect game, and I would say that waiting for a sale might be a good way to engage with it, to pick it up. I think I felt like a $30 sale, maybe 40 even, is like a pretty good price point for something like this. But there is a lot of heart in it, and there's a lot of artistic merit here, and I think it's too bad that it got buried because I think it does some things with its story that I thought just really did work quite well. And I think it's too bad because I feel like it's going to be in a few more years. It'll be one of those games where if you mention it, people are going to be like, "What? I don't know what that is."
Hmm. I see it on GameStop. It's $50 there. I see it there. And the length of this game, you said it's too long. Where does it clock in at?
So I think my playthrough was like 50, like 40, 50 out, 45, 50 hours, something like that. I'll look at what it's like act how like it's how long to beat page says, because if you just wrap the story here, um it says 20 to 30, but like I said, I tried to do a lot more. So I ended up being, yeah, closer to 50. It says 60 hours for like completionist to do everything in the game. So I guess I was somewhere in between those two. But yeah, I think it could have been tightened up a little bit. Maybe the map could have been a little smaller, or even maybe it could have been a bit more of a linear game. Like I don't know if it necessarily needed to be open world in general. I mean, I can only say I personally have open world fatigue with video games in general. So, like, maybe that's just me. Some others might disagree, but
Oh. Some pretty cool abilities. I see you got a little bit of a skill tree there. So you get some pretty
yeah,
those options pretty good. Developed.
yeah. I mean, I like like I said, I like the gameplay. I think it feels good. It's just a matter of it being somewhat familiar. But it plays like a combination of like the new God of War games and the Shadow of Mordor games. So you have both characters that you're controlling at once. You've got a skill tree. You can swap between them on the fly with the press of a button. And they both have kind of different special abilities that they can use. And like Antea, I think between of the two of them, she's the more fun one to play as because as a spirit, like as a supernatural being herself, she has like a bunch of cool powers that you can experiment with. And I'd say like I probably spent more of the game just transforming into her whenever I got the chance. And there was a lot of fun to be had too. I don't want it to sound like I'm putting the gameplay down too hard because I still think that there's a lot to enjoy about it.
So did you already give your rating?
I did not. So at the end of the day, I think I would give it like like a pretty strong tune in. I wouldn't be quite enough to get up to a peak. So like I said, some pacing issues, some open world fatigue issue, and a little bit of repetitiveness at times. Can take away a little bit of it, but at the end of the day, I still think that these, like I said, I think the story is quite strong. I think these two lead characters and the relationship between them is really well written and really well acted, and I thought that really made the whole experience worth it. They have been honestly some of my favorite like brand new original characters in a video game, in at least for sure in 2024.
Mm, okay. Well, Sage gives Banishers, new Ghost of the Ghost of Eden there. Um, a tune in.